Go ahead.
Okay. Slides out of order. Is that better? Is that the goodest, the better viewing, the larger viewing, Wendy?
Yes.
Let's hope my speech gets better than saying gooder.
You may want to call the meeting to order.
Yeah. Well, this is the current land use committee of the Regional Planning Commission. We are discussing the area rezoning for the Mountain Home neighborhood, and we'll get into the details, but it involves rezoning 20 parcels from R4 and I2 to R2, B3, and MX1. And commissioners, if you have questions anytime, you've reviewed this in your staff report. If you have any questions, hop in. I'll run through this briefly, but I want to get to discussion as quickly as possible. As I mentioned, there's 20 parcels total. On the left side of your screen, you can see the current zoning with the I2 in purple, the R4 in the darker yellow, and overlaid on that is the area that's to be rezoned. You can also see the overlay line, dash line, that'll come up later. That's the DO design overlay. And then on the right, you can see a little bit better the area is actually to be rezoned or proposed to be rezoned and shaded correctly. The next slide on the left shows you the current land use. And so you'll see there's actually already a really strong and diverse mix of land uses. And in fact, there's in this parcel here, there's a commercial structure as well. And so a portion of that could be, considered red, though it hasn't been used. You've got some vacant land, you have multifamily, you have single family, you have commercial, you have park, you have church, you have business, you've got some mobile home tracts. So for a pretty small area, that's a lot of different land uses. As we look at our future land use map, which we know is a very generalized tool for proposing future land use, they show the entire area as residential, even along state of Franklin, where it's currently industrial and business. So that's a little bit odd that along arterials and collectors that they would show that as pure residential, though the residential includes multifamily. So there's no distinction in our future land use between single family. And so it gives the impression that it's very low density and low intensity, but it certainly could be high density, which is not what we're proposing. We are not proposing any high density multifamily.
Can I jump in there, Matt?
What's that?
Can I jump in there just
Yeah, sure.
Just for a split second on where you were on the future land use map? There will be more discussion about this during the meeting tonight. And Matt is exactly right in terms of the future land use map taking a broad brush approach. It is normal for your future land use maps to take broad brush approaches, and then oftentimes to have their margins along the centers of major corridors, major arterial roadways. What they often cannot do and have a hard time anticipating are market realities and shifts in both market expectations, public infrastructure improvements, and even some neighborhood changes. So, for example, I believe, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, this version of the future land use map, I believe, was last adopted in 2007. And so at that time, Founders Park was not in. Model Mill was still had yet to burn. There at the time probably appeared to be no incentive for investment whatsoever in this area. So there are realities that will shift and change over time that then it's our responsibility as staff to point those out. And when we make recommendations that might be technically inconsistent with the future land use map. Explain why.
Great points. Quickly, I refer to these objectives in the land use element. For this committee, I want to read through those real quickly. Objective 2.3 is strengthen existing neighborhoods and guide the development of new neighborhoods in order to maintain areas that remain strong, vibrant residential neighborhoods. 2.4, promote infill and redevelopment within the city to revitalize unused or underused property while promoting the preservation of viable and affordable housing stock. 2.5, to encourage a variety of housing opportunities and developments, the city shall pursue the following policy actions. And that refers to the medium density being located along collector and arterial streets. Objective, these are actually numbered differently for some reason. The other one referenced, I think it's on the slide, is 2.5, reads, encourage the concept of mixed use development that includes provisions for planned unit developments and that creates diverse and attractive neighborhoods. So though the future land use map itself shows this as purely residential, the other objectives that are in the comprehensive plan support this type of rezoning. I've added this map recently to your staff report. I think looking at the big picture for this area, its proximity to downtown, all of the commercial high intensity uses that run out along State of Franklin Road and along Market and Main to the north, and how those would run down Watauga Avenue, which is also an arterial street. There's a lot that's being pulled down West Walnut. So there's this pattern development and this kind of shift that's being propelled by redevelopments like Founders Park and Model Mill. So this area is right adjacent to all that. And so it makes sense that a more fine-tuned look at the zoning in this area occurs. And then we've broken this up into two phases. This is the area that we're considering tonight. And then this area along the rest of Watauga Avenue would be considered at another time. And that's not exactly parcel for parcel phase 2. There's a portion over here in the R4 that's being discussed to be downzoned to protect the interiors of the lots. We also can get a good look at this R2C that's in this neighborhood. That was done in the early 2000s, I believe. And so, we're kind of revisiting that. Some of the parcels that were not rezoned at the time, all we're looking at is properties that remained R4 and those that were industrial related to the previous use along the railroad tracks, and the properties associated with Founders Park. So just big picture there. We've got the intersection of an arterial and a collector, proximity to downtown WWD, this need for reinvestment, and this market pressure based on these public investments that have primed this area with the beautiful views of the city and the mountains in the distance.
Ed?
Yes.
Why did we choose to skip those 2 or 3 streets there right past the apartments on Watauga?
These?
No, come down.
These?
No, right here, right along Watauga, right up against Watauga, right there.
On this side?
On the, what would that be? The west side.
Those are facing into Highland Avenue. So any of the properties for this phase of the redevelopment and the next phase of the redevelopment, we're really looking at the properties that face Watauga. So that the existing buildings are fronting Watauga.
Okay.
Any single family uses that are facing one of the side streets they act as kind of a buffer between this transition of higher intensity uses to the low density single family.
Okay.
If you were to also,
go ahead.
if you were to also apply a human face to the physical elements of the earth, kind of, or of the built environment, Highland Avenue, especially where Highland Avenue comes up and tees into Watauga, is oriented inward. Is those homes are facing one another all the way out to Watauga. I mean, as Matt indicated, but that's an important development characteristic to protect and preserve. What it's the message that it is sending is that the residential along Highland currently and should extend and be protected all the way out to Watauga. On the other streets to the north, Lamont, and then as you get into the others heading towards Market and Main, as Matt indicated, you've got buildings that directly front onto Watauga that actually have their back to the internal part of the neighborhood. It's those where we are focusing on the mixed use and encouraging the adaptive reuse or redevelopment.
Thanks.
The one exception could be this corner right here. The house faces Highland Avenue, but the sidewalk from the front of the house leads to the corner and opens up to Watauga. And then across, of course, it's not across the street is not another single family, I don't believe. So we can take a closer look at that with phase 2.
And we'll have some ground shots as well.
Just talking about phase 2 quickly, the idea was that we would look at how the neighborhood responded to this proposal, how the planning commission and city commission responded to this proposal, and then see if we wanted to pursue that further. Just quickly, really wanted to provide some photographs of how this area relates to the surrounding area. So you can see these great views of Founders Park. From Founders Park, looking up back at the neighborhood, you can see this relationship there with the elevation above the park. You can see what it looks like at night, especially now with all the Founders Park being lit up with the Christmas trees. And then down along Highland, as you approach right into the parking lot, right along this floodplain, this open space for the where the creek is. There really is. It is the transition zone between, it's the edge of the furthest reaches of the downtown activity. I think of Founders Park as a downtown park. And so it reaches out to here, and then you've got to transition back into the low density single family traditional neighborhood. Great views of Model Mill with Buffalo Mountain in the background. And of course, Model Mill being lit up at night. These are all views from the neighborhood. This is down Whitney Street on the left. Again, Model Mill and Buffalo Mountain, and then down Watauga Avenue, just an incredible view of Buffalo. Somewhat marred by overhead power lines, but maybe that's part of a different conversation when we're talking about streets and sidewalks and utilities. At this point, we're just looking at private property.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
While we're able to take advantage of this small committee setting, can you unshare and can I share my screen just for a split second? Just for a split second. I want to, and you've already made this point, but while you were talking, I pulled this up. Can everybody see my Google image?
Yes.
Okay. Check this out. This is interesting. And this speaks to how the comprehensive plan needs to be updated. But then even when you update the comprehensive plan, it is still, nobody walks around with a crystal ball. And so you just never know what public and infrastructure or other market realities will occur that can shift your long-range planning. And so this is how you see it as of today. This is May of 2018. And this is here on the corner of Lamont and Commerce. So this is what's neat about Google. Go back to 2012. And you see just how different the character is of the area. The old industrial facility here had been demoed, but we had not yet completed Founders Park. And then these buildings were still here. You can see the relationship of these properties to these older buildings and to what was to come. And you can see how there would be less incentive, less desire for investment in that area when now, and then Matt's pictures even do it better, you know, to show both night and day shots, what has happened to the area. It's really just phenomenal.
Bob, do you recall, I asked some questions of some folks who've been around longer about the uses of the buildings that were there. I know the tobacco warehouse and there was a gas station at the corner. Do you know what those buildings that were shown that were still standing in that shot, what they were used for?
The red buildings?
The brick or red, yeah.
No, if I had to guess, I think they were warehouse also.
Yeah. The reason I ask is
been told that they were warehousing for food distribution or for a grocery store.
oh yeah, Kelly Foods.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
correct. I thought that maybe that was part of the tobacco warehouses, but that may be where that was located. Everybody can see my screen again.
Mhm.
Is it big or is it small? When is it?
It's split screen.
Split screen.
We can see your notes and things like that.
Is that better?
No. It's something having to do with PowerPoint, not having to do with can you
Let me try this again.
it's like it's like what you would see when you're showing a PowerPoint. It's all your hidden notes and everything.
Yeah. Wait a second here. I thought I had this.
It's a good thing you didn't have any really rough notes on there.
Yeah. For some reason, it's got like 3 PowerPoints open on the. Let me.
So while you're doing that,
Yeah.
Just so we don't have dead airspace, I'm going to reach out to Mr. Mays. I was watching your face, Brett, on some of the conversation about the comp plan. Did you have questions? Were there concerns or questions that popped up?
To be honest with you, it's a pretty good amount of information. And so those facial expressions were me trying to process
Gotcha.
all
Okay,
of the information.
gotcha.
And for some reason, I am like really stuck on why currently, and assuming I'm correct, is there like a one lot in Lamont Street that's business?
Yes. Right in
Okay.
the middle, and it's not part of this rezoning.
Now, why is that?
Why is it commercial?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that's exactly where I was headed. That is perfect. I'm going to skip up a couple slides.
It's not even a part of this. So I'm like, what? And I hate to that's the attorney in me getting like.
It dovetails straight from this conversation about the warehouses and the previous character of this neighborhood. The commercial building is right here on the left with the snow on it. That's right in the middle of Lamont Street. The one on the right is on right near the corner of Watauga and Highland.
Faces Watauga.
Faces Watauga. And so these are 2 neighborhood scale commercial buildings that are existing. So why was there this mixed type of uses in this neighborhood? That goes back to, well, there's several reasons, but and Preston touched on this some in the staff report, that when these neighborhoods were originally developed, there was a need, there's a lot less mobility. This was probably connected to the downtown through a trolley, talking about walkable neighborhoods. And so this would have been a market, a corner market, something to that effect. And then even later on, and so that's going back turn of the century when these were developed. Later on, you have these industrial uses. So you have, a large number of employees. They may live in the neighborhood. They may be getting off at different shifts. And so having these kind of neighborhood commercial spots would allow neighbors and residents to be able to do some of their shopping in a convenient location. Now, the way we've developed over the last 50 years is really contrary to this. And so that's why they're there. They just exist from a different time period. And what we're proposing with this mixed use zoning for a large number of these parcels is to provide that opportunity again, is to provide some neighborhood scale commercial uses mixed in with residential uses. And it's interesting, the owner of this one on the left contacted us about this rezoning, asked a bunch of questions, was initially really wary of it, but then after talking to us, really became a huge fan of it. He's a champion of this. He's talking to other residents and fully supports it. And he owns this property and he wanted it to be included in the rezoning. And we considered it. The issue we're having, if we go back to the map, is that we've been very intentional about protecting the interior lots as a residential character. Sorry. So we're
That
kind
was
of
my
keeping this
question,
along
yeah.
the edges. Rather, if we start moving into the interior lots, this one's better. We really want to protect these interior blocks. And so if we do one here, even though there's an existing commercial building today, what does that do to that pattern of development when we start introducing commercial in the center of a block? So it's still, we debated back and forth about whether it was appropriate or not. And we landed with, well, let's not complicate things. This was literally the day staff, the packet was going out. We had this request. So we said we could include it with phase 2, give it further study. He could request it on his own to do it MX zoning. So that goes back to this, the mix of land uses shown here on the left. That's that building there. The other one I talked about is right here.
Can I just piggyback off of that? What then was, and I get what you're saying about the Lamont Street lots. So what was the difference between these two little sections between Highland and the Highland Lamont alley? You see what I'm saying? Like where there's kind of,
Right here?
no, back over. So there's those two sections right there. So it looks like one is included and one is not, between the alleyway and Highland.
The only ones that are considered for rezoning, this is a little bit confusing. This MX1 already exists. And
Okay.
it was rezoned a few months ago. It faces onto the parking lot of Founders Park.
Okay. So those lots that I'm looking at are not actually being rezoned.
Right. The one that is being rezoned is on the corner of Lamont and Whitney. It's included. And again, it interfaces with this kind of peninsula right here that overlooks the park. This whole stretch right here really faces out all the way down Highland. You can see into the park.
Okay.
So it interfaces well. This property owner in particular is very supportive of the MX1. So we included that one. But the rest are really, kind of on the edges of this area.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a bit confusing because there's MX1. There's one. This shows it a little bit better. There's one that's already MX1. This is current zoning. And you can see here that it's not included in the rezoning.
So the ones that I was talking about right there on Highland, those are currently are R2C or something different?
The 1, 2, 3, 4 here are R2C.
And then right next to that, to the right?
R4. Those 5 right there are R4.
Okay.
And we're not changing any of that.
Okay.
Any other questions? I think we're right here. Part of the MX zoning requires any new development. It's a design standard that says you have to meet the architectural character of the neighborhood. So I went out and took a few photos just to reflect this. There's a lot of turn of the century craftsman style bungalows, four squares, even some Victorian. But this is kind of representative of the neighborhood here. So new development would need to reflect some of that character so that it's compatible with the neighborhood.
How is that enforced, Matt?
What's that?
How would that be enforced if somebody's building something that's going to be more commercial in nature? How do we ensure that it's going to meet those kinds of demands?
So typically, and hopefully going forward, we develop better detailed design standards that give developers a very clear path forward, such as form-based codes, or there's some other great resources out there that we're going to be talking about soon that are teed up to be part of a conversation for another zoning district that we want to create, an urban residential zoning district. And this is something staff has been talking about for a couple of years. That district would have design standards that would be more detailed. But ultimately, at this point, we're talking about staff review, administrative review of the proposed development and making sure that it is compliant with the zoning code.
Okay.
There's also some multifamily in the neighborhood. The one on the right, Maplestone, is part of the rezoning. It's set to propose to go MX1. The one on the left is in the center block of Highland that we were just talking about. It is not part of this rezoning, but I think it's a really great example of what you get with R4 zoning. So we are planning to rezone, I think there's 12 lots that are R4. This is what you can build today with R4. This property does not reflect the character of the neighborhood. It does not even face the street. Nothing about this resembles the traditional neighborhood design and character of this neighborhood. It is incompatible, to be nice. So with MX1, we have the same density as R4. The way the MX1 residential works is that it permits residential development not to exceed 1.5 times of the density of the residential development within a 1,000-foot radius, but shall not exceed the density of R4 zoning. It shall not exceed 14 units per acre. So it is capped at 14 units per acre. The current R4 zoning is capped at 14 units per acre. But MX1 also has this other standard that you have to go out and look at the surrounding neighborhood and figure out the density. And if it doesn't reach that cap, then you're capped at a lower number. In this particular case, the 1,000-foot radius for, we picked one of the vacant lots on Highland. We did a 1,000-foot radius from the center of this study area. And because it did grab University Edge Apartments and Watauga Square Apartments, that shot the numbers up. The units were up, and the land area was those are larger lots too, but it wasn't, the density there is high density, so it shot the numbers up. So we ended up with 11.05 units per acre, which you then multiply times 1.5. That comes out to 16.5 units per acre is what would be allowed. But we also had the provision that says it cannot exceed 14. So for this particular area, depending on the lot, it's going to be, most of these are, any of the lot in this area is probably going to grab University Edge and Watauga Square. So the development, the maximum density for this area is going to be 14 units per acre, which is what it is today. The difference is that we have this architectural design standard that says if you're going to develop it, it needs to meet the character of the neighborhood. So we're going from R4 to MX1. If somebody wants to do multifamily under one, they're now going to do they can still do multifamily under the other at the same density, but they need to do it in a way that's compatible with the neighborhood. So I think that this change from a residential standpoint very well serves the neighborhood and the current residents by providing this compatibility standard, which currently does not exist and can produce developments like we saw on the previous slide.
Matt, that architectural standard exists today?
It does. And you will definitely get a chance to learn more about the MX1 zoning district and some of the proposed tweaks we're proposing. That's the first item. It was in your staff report or in your packet. It'll also be the first item on the Planning Commission agenda tonight. So we'll go into a deep dive into the details of MX1, which will then help you as you make a decision on this rezoning. And so this is kind of a brief overview of what you could expect from a development in this area. So that's the residential component. You also have the commercial component. The commercial uses we will review as part of the Planning Commission item, but they're neighborhood business uses. They're uses that are found in our other neighborhood business districts. The key difference is that they're capped at 2,000 square feet. So you're not going to get big box. You're not going to get
Not even
Walgreens. What'd you say?
I said not even a Walgreens. Which
Yeah,
is,
no Walgreens. It's going to be small scale, compatible with the neighborhood because it's capped at 2,000 square feet. Again, that architectural design standard would apply and ensure further compatibility. And from a developer standpoint, there's more flexibility. There's a reduced level of requirements for MX1, which oftentimes produces a suburban style development. If you follow our parking requirements, our landscaping requirements, all of those requirements, you're going to be forced to use more land pretty much and have further separation from your adjacent land uses. So by relaxing some of those standards, it fits better for an urban infill type of use, especially on some of these small lots. Any questions about that? MX1 residential and commercial applications? And
Yeah, you may have said this, I'm sorry if I missed it, but the design standards we're talking about in that particular area, is that an overlay or is that
it actually is
historical
part
overlay?
it's part of the underlying MX1 zoning.
Oh, okay.
So for instance,
So are there,
go ahead.
so I guess maybe for the Planning Commission, we're going to hear a little more about those specific standards, I guess.
Well, there are not specifics. There's a line of code that says you must meet the architectural style of character and materials of the surrounding neighborhood. So that leaves a lot of discretion to staff to determine what that is. And so, with my work in the historic zoning, I've gained a good understanding of what those key distinctions are, what types of elements within a development would make it compatible, especially with a historic district, and then what type of materials would be appropriate. But essentially what you do is you look at the existing neighborhood, you inventory the types of materials used, you look at the architectural elements, architectural style, and you document all that. And then the proposed development would have to have include some of those elements and materials. That's typically how a design guideline or design standard is developed in a location specific, for any specific location. Because this is an underlying zoning district, it could be applied anywhere in the city, right? So each area of the city is going to have a different character and different materials. So if you go into those specifics in your zoning code, you could end up, creating a bit of a mess or having things that are incompatible. So basing it just on the neighborhood where the development's going to take place with the MX1 zoning means you can apply the surrounding area on a case-by-case basis.
It just sounds like a can of worms for staff initially, and then for us ultimately.
Well,
Ultimately be up to the staff.
it would be up to staff.
In other words, it would never come to us.
It would not be part of a concept plan. No, that type of detail comes at the building permit step. It wouldn't even be at the site plan stage. So yeah, it'll be up to staff to work with those developers and make sure that they are serving the residents of the surrounding area well with the new development.
There's a little bit of a wrinkle. North Carolina and Tennessee share a circumstance that South Carolina takes advantage of. South Carolina, you have and Matt knows this, I'm sure, intimately, being a native South Carolinian. In South Carolina, you have the authority to have discretionary plan review at the board level. In Tennessee and North Carolina, you do not. So, meaning staff or site plans should always be approved administratively. What that means is that the policy side, where you, the board and the city commission, establish what are going to be the standards in the ordinance, that's where and why it's important that the planning commission be engaged in that level of conversation. What should our standards be? What, are we going to bulletize them? How are they going to be called out in the code? That policy level conversation. And then once that gets adopted, then it's up to staff to apply it. The part that makes South Carolina interesting and sometimes difficult is that not difficult for really anybody other than a developer, is that a developer has to go in front of a board oftentimes and say, I'm begging you, please, can I have this project the way I've designed it? And they have discretion. The board has discretionary authority to say, no, actually, we think you need to change it. But that's not allowed in Tennessee.
Well, it's not appropriate. We certainly don't have time tonight, but at some point, I think we need a little more clarity here. I mean, it sounds like we're bumping up against covenant type issues. And I know that's not in our purview. We're basically at land use, but it sounds like ultimately a developer shows up in this area and wants to build X, Y, Z. And if it doesn't match in somebody's opinion, the neighborhood, then I think we're creating some issues, aren't we?
Well, we do have, overlays, which there's an overlay here as well, which also has design standards and has extra higher standards for development in those areas. Our historic districts have higher standards in those areas. So this would be similar to that. The MX1, if you're going to develop in that area, because it is mixed use, involves residents and commercial uses, and would be applied as a transition zone between existing neighborhoods and maybe some other high traffic corridors. It needs to be sensitive, needs to be done with context. And so that provision ensures that. And I think it serves, it gives a higher level of assurance to residents of what's going to happen in their neighborhood. Make sure it's compatible.
Oh, I'm going to be interested to see how this plays out.
Well, it's already there. I mean, so that exists. That's existing code in our MX1 zoning district.
Yeah, I think that's probably an important distinction is that those form-based and design standards are already, those policy conversations have already been held. And so, I do agree though, and forgive me, Commissioner Cooper, if you were making reference to a specific standard that I maybe missed. Matt and I both agree, and will continue to be something that I look for in the code through time, opportunities to amend the code to get rid of should language. It is very dangerous for your code to have, you should do this, or
This is encouraged.
this is encouraged. That is dangerous language that where people start calling Mr. Mays. Your code needs to be clear and itemized with what the standards are.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to open up this big, and I just kind of wanted to say put it out there from Paul. I completely, as an attorney, understand you cannot in a document provide for every situation, variable, contingency. And when you try to do that, you end up creating a lot more problems than you really would solve. And so it's just, I think it's difficult from a land use standpoint, striking that balance between discretion, a good level of discretion, and also when a developer wants to come in and they say, well, this is really just all discretionary. And so I don't know, and I know you guys have already had that discussion when you created the MX1, but that's probably, that was the only thing I was trying to get at, is what's kind of the baseline for discretion, I guess. But we can move. I just kind of wanted to say that. I didn't mean to open up the kind of a big can of worms or anything.
I do agree that, we could look at additional language that's specific. I believe, and we can talk about it, planning commission, I'll have the actual code up, but
Just to let you guys know, it's 5:46 and I do need to
we're
go.
wrapping up.
Hey, Mr. Cooper, it's Christy from ECU.
We could add some language that's specific to, what elements need to be insured. So it needs to, I think there's already a provision that says it has to face the street and have an entrance facing the street. So playing on that, you would have different types of architectural features that could be specifically listed as being considered. But you can't say that, it has to have a front porch, because in this neighborhood, there's all front porches, but in other neighborhoods, there's not. And so I think listing the types of things you would look at would help and add more clarity to a developer and help a staff person know what they need to review. So I definitely agree that it's on the vague side, but I do think it's an important element that was put in here to protect neighborhoods, protect residents, and ensure compatibility. But we're not messing with, we are, discussing the MX1 tonight and potential revisions, but we have not proposed any changes to that particular section.
Right.
As I mentioned earlier, as we get into the urban residential zoning district, creating that district, as we look to continue to improve on our neighborhood business districts and these other goals that we have for the Planning Commission, part of that will involve getting into more form-based codes, looking at design standards, and having more clear language that a developer can follow. And I would suggest that we save that discussion, because it is complex, once staff has had a chance to put together a proposal that is in line with those other zoning districts that have been talked about for like 2 years now. And we're getting closer and closer, and we've got the resources. We know what the models are. We need to pull it together and come up with a proposal. Hopefully that'll happen and will be a goal in 2021. Staff met and discussed these very items and specifics to these architectural standards for multifamily uses just last Friday. And so it's on the front burner. And if we try to get into that tonight as part of the changes for the MX1, I think we just get really bogged down. And so this area rezoning goes hand in hand with the MX1 changes. If we rezone the area and we make changes to the MX1, those changes will apply to the zoning, the parcels that are zoned MX1. If we change the MX1 again in 6 months, it will still apply to the current MX1. They will not be grandfathered in to the old code. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. And, you know, we're running up against the clock. The only other,
I have to shut
that's
down in
pretty
1
much
minute.
it. What's
I have
that,
to shut
Wendy?
down- I have to shut down in 1 minute to start the others.
Okay.
Do we have an action that we need to take as a subcommittee?
This was for information only.
Okay.
So good review. You know, be willing to share your thoughts and what you feel like the committee covered tonight during the planning commission meeting. Stacy, if you want to kind of after staff presentation, you want to make some comments about the committee meeting, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Preston, anything else?
I don't think I can do anything in less than 20 seconds.
Yeah,